What if I told you that no matter how you live your life, no matter what you pursue, believe, or ignore, there is a moment coming when everything gets sorted? That's what Jesus is revealing in what's known as the parable of the net. Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to Biblical Reality Check. I'd like you to picture this: the shoreline at dawn, fishermen standing knee deep in the water, casting a large dragnet into the sea. The net sinks, expands, and begins gathering everything in its path: fish of every kind, debris, shells, seaweed, creatures both beautiful and strange. The net does not discriminate, it gathers everything. Jesus uses this exact image in Matthew 13, verses 47 to 50, saying, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Like the parables of the hidden treasure and the pearl of great value, this one unfolds in four movements. Number one, the net gathers everything. Number two, the net becomes full. Number three, the catch is sorted. And number four, separation is final. But unlike the others, this parable is not about seeking, discovering, or choosing. It's about revealing and alignment. Note that the net doesn't just catch the good fish, it catches them all, desirable or not. This is the first critical insight. The net represents consciousness expanding. When consciousness expands, it gathers everything: beliefs, habits, regrets, relationships, identities, unresolved wounds, unintegrated shadows, motivations, actions, latent potentials, everything. Nothing stays hidden when the net is drawn in. This is why spiritual growth often feels messy. Awakening doesn't just bring clarity, it brings exposure. The net pulls everything to the surface. Once the net is full, the fishermen sit down and begin to sort. The good fish are kept and the bad are thrown away. At the surface level, the sorting involves the separation of the wicked and the righteous, the good from the bad. But I think we need to keep in mind that while Jesus often speaks to groups, his teachings ultimately must be applied within the individual mind where transformation takes place. Viewed within that psychological framework, the sorting represents the moment when outdated identities fall away, dysfunctional patterns can no longer continue, relationships that cannot grow with you naturally dissolve, coping mechanisms that once protected you now limit you, and truth becomes absolutely non negotiable. It's not so much about moral judgment as it is about alignment. After the sorting, what remains is coherent, integrated, and capable of carrying you into the next stage of life. The kingdom is not the net itself. The kingdom is the transformation produced by the sorting. It is the shift from fragmentation to clarity, ego to truth, fear to alignment, and non conscious patterns to conscious choice. Then Jesus says, "So it will be at the end of the age." At the literal level, Jesus is describing the final judgment at the end of the age. But like many of his parables, the pattern also appears within us. Every major transition in life contains its own end of the age moment: the end of childhood, the end of a marriage, the end of a career identity, the end of a world view, the end of a false self, and yes, even the end of a human life. When an age ends, Sorting becomes unavoidable. What is incompatible with the new level cannot cross over. This is why transitions often feel like judgment. They expose what cannot continue. As part of the sorting process, Jesus says the angels will separate the wicked from the righteous. If we look at the parable psychologically, the angels function much like the discerning faculty within consciousness that separates what is true from what is false. Once all is sorted, the separation is permanent. There's no reclassification, no adjustment, no second pass. The good remain, the bad are discarded. This is the hardest part of the parable because it introduces a reality modern thinking tends to reject. Not everything is equally valuable, and not every life is aligned with what is true. Modern thinking carries a deep resistance to the idea that value is not evenly distributed across choices or lives. We've built a culture around the premise that authenticity is the highest good, that sincerity guarantees meaning, and that every path is simply a different expression of the same underlying truth. The parable of the net confronts that assumption directly. It insists that when everything is gathered together, the differences are not erased, they are revealed. Some patterns produce integrity, some produce collapse, some align with reality, some fight with it. The sorting is not an act of judgment, it is an act of recognition. This is why the parable feels abrasive to contemporary sensibilities. It suggests that alignment with truth is not automatic, not guaranteed, and not evenly distributed. It tells us that a life becomes aligned with truth only through self confrontation, the relinquishing of illusions, and choosing reality over comfort. Effort can coexist with avoidance. Identity can coexist with self deception. The net gathers all of it, but the sorting reveals what has actually moved toward truth. The permanence of the separation symbolizes something psychologically real. Trajectories harden. A pattern repeated becomes a structure becomes a character becomes a destiny. At a certain point, a life shaped around avoidance or distortion becomes incompatible with higher levels of consciousness, not because the person is bad but because the architecture they've built cannot withstand truth. The parable names the cost of postponing reality. You can delay sorting for a season, but you cannot escape it forever. And this is the hardest part of the parable. It rejects the modern myth of equal outcomes. It says that not everything gathered in the net is fit for the next stage of development. Not every pattern is viable. Not every trajectory leads to the same place. This is not condemnation, it's differentiation. It's the same principle found in biology, psychology, and physics. Systems sort themselves according to what is structurally sound. The parable simply applies that principle to the human soul. It reminds us that alignment matters, and the outcome of a life is not interchangeable with any other. Let's make this real by looking at a modern example. Imagine a man named Daniel. From the outside, Daniel looks like he's doing fine. He has a stable career, a social life, a sense of independence. He isn't reckless or destructive. He simply lives without much reflection. He makes decisions based on things like convenience, pleasure, and comfort. If something feels good, he pursues it. If something is difficult or requires sacrifice, he avoids it. Over time, these small choices become patterns, avoiding responsibility, postponing meaningful growth, and prioritizing distraction over purpose. But nothing in his life is forcing him to confront this. He isn't failing, he isn't in crisis, so he assumes everything is fine. The net is still in the water. Now imagine Daniel years later. The distractions have faded, the noise has quieted, and for the first time, he sees his life clearly. Not what he meant to become, but what he actually has become. And the realization hits hard. He didn't build anything of lasting value, not because he couldn't, but because he never chose to. This is the moment the parable points to, when everything that was gathered is finally sorted and evaluated. Like Daniel, you are becoming something throughout your life, whether intentionally or not. Your patterns are shaping you, your values are directing you, your choices are forming a structure. And at some point, now or in the hereafter, that structure is revealed for what it is, not based on appearances, not based on intentions, but based on truth. So here's the real question. If your life were sorted today, what would remain? Because the reality is, you don't wait until the end to become something. You are becoming it right now. The net is still in the water, which means something really powerful. You still have the ability to change what's being gathered. Jesus ends the parable by saying that the angels will throw the wicked into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The furnace imagery is intense, but its psychological meaning is precise. Fire in Scripture symbolizes purification, transformation, and the burning away of what is no longer viable. The weeping and gnashing of teeth is the emotional resistance we feel when the ego loses something it was attached to. It's the pain of letting go, the grief of releasing identities that once felt essential, and the internal protest of a system being forced to change and evolve. So, beyond its judgment imagery, the net also reveals a profound truth about perception. The moment when everything inside you gets sorted. That is the moment when what is true separates itself from what is false, when what is alive separates itself from what is dead, and when what belongs to your future finally breaks away from what belongs to your past. However, once that sorting occurs, another challenge emerges. Clarity creates responsibility. Need becomes undeniable. The soul begins knocking on a door that can no longer be ignored. And that is where we go next. In the parable of the friend at midnight, Jesus shows what perception feels like when need becomes undeniable, when the inner world begins pounding on the door, demanding response, demanding alignment, demanding truth. The net is the sorting. The friend at midnight is the summons that follows. See you there. Thanks for watching.